Okay, so that's done. And welcome everyone for our third session of the BA Book Club on Business Architecture. I'm Adriana Silva, and I'm the IIBA UK Community Director for the London in the Southeast. And we have the ultimate joy of being today with Debra and Vicky Rothwell to have this conversation. So a bit of introduction. If you are new to IIBA, if you don't know who we are, I will just share my screen, and you tell me if you see the slides in a minute, please. Because from the moment I share, I probably won't be able to see what people comment or do. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. So today, I believe, oh, sorry, now it's right. So we are here for the third session today. If you haven't been with us from the first session, and I thank you very much for continuing to be with us. I'm sure we'll have plenty of very insightful discussions today. Today on the third session, we have Debra and Vicky Rothwell. And on the 4th of July, within 13 days, we'll have an in-person session in London. And you are more than welcome to join us. The details for how to register for that session, when practical applications of business architecture will be discussed, they are all on the IIBA website. We'll be sharing the link for you to register during the session. So a bit about IIBA. You may know or not that we have about 1,400 people affiliated in the UK chapter. We are the volunteer chapter of IIBA. We are spread and divided in 5 main branches regionally in the UK. We have many corporate members and we have also individual members in our membership. And the work we do of organizing the sessions, running professional development initiatives, it's all possible due to a number of around 50 volunteers working with IIBA UK. And I have the pleasure to be one of them. So we are a group run by BAs for BAs. And we are involved in annual conferences. We have many virtual offerings, webinars, mentoring scheme, brown bag sessions, and the BA Book Club, which is what we are doing today. We have activities with the community, seminar, workshops, socials, and we also offer corporate membership for companies who would like to use the IIBA book body of knowledge to develop their staff. I will just, because we have, just to give more time for our wonderful speakers, I will just show where you can find us on social media, and you find all about what I'm talking about there. You can find it on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube, where we started to have regular uploads to our channel. So in our website, you will find about opportunities to volunteer with us. So keep an eye on our website, and if you would like to get involved, it would be a pleasure to have you with us. These are the shadow of the 4 sessions on business architectures. We are in the second half of. So the first session was an introduction to business architecture. Second session, business architecture as a service. Today, it's the business architecture capability and competence views. And the 4th session in person will be practical applications of business architecture. So we have Debra with us, Vicky Rothwell, myself, Adriana Silva, and my colleague, Katerina, as a panelist today. And we are going to start this conversation with our wonderful speakers. Let me just stop sharing my screen. And we are back to our conversation. Before we start, to all of you who have attended so far, we have now passing 20 people with us. Thank you very much for joining us. You are more than welcome to use the Q&A to send questions for Vicky and Debra to answer in due course. And you also feel free to interact in the chat. For example, someone has said, can you let me know where they are? When you say, I will get this question later. Stephanie Flynn, if you'd like to send more details about what you can let to know where they are. What exactly are you talking about? So I can answer accordingly. But yes, feel free to interact in the chat. The previous sessions. The recordings you can access from our website. I will put the links on the chat during the session, okay? But just not to delay. Let's get started, Vicky and Debra. So I will start with the first question. And I have a question for Debra Paul. Debra, could you please present us a brief recap of what is business architecture as a discipline?
Okay, so business architecture is a discipline that looks at the organization's service offering, the organization's capabilities that enable that service offering, the high-level view of how the organization works within its ecosystem and relates within that ecosystem, and the strategic alignment that all of that has with what the organization is trying to achieve. So basically, it takes the concept, if you like, of an architecture, which I think we're all familiar with in lots of other contexts, and says, okay, what is the way that this organization is architected, and what do we as business architects do to model that, to help the organization work with that, and to support the organization in delivering its services and making sure it has the ability to do that. And also, what is it about the organizational architecture that needs maybe to change? Maybe because the strategy has changed, or maybe in order to execute the strategy, we need to look at things a bit differently. And also to take account of the fact that out in the wider world, all sorts of things change. And sometimes the architecture of the organization needs to be responding to that, or even taking the opportunities that that offers. So it's, I think, one of the most powerful views of an organization is to look at it through an architecture lens and to see how all these pieces fit together and make the organization work. So it's a fantastic role, because it's the role that enables that to happen. Vicky, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think, when you look at the business architecture, you are understanding what that company is there for. What is it there to do? Why is that company in existence? A bit back to your point in terms of what are the services that it's delivering, and what does it need in order to deliver those services. It's looking at everything from possibly a more physical, in terms of buildings, in terms of processes and location, and how does this company sort of exist to deliver those services, and what capabilities does it need in order to do that. It's that real high level of understanding those motivational drivers, understanding where that company wants to get to, and helping understand. And I'm getting interrupted, but yeah, so, and it's looking again as well, I think, at the first point from that business architecture lens, it's where we start and see that business object and understand how that information needs to flow through in order for service levels to be achieved, in order for them to reach their goals and ambitions, and monitor against that. It's giving an organisation the ability to monitor what it is delivering.
I think that's a good way to a good start for our conversation. And for example, in your view, it's just something on the back of my head while I listen to yourselves talking. How, for example, thinking of all the organizations you have been in contact with or worked well, what is the full understanding of what business architecture can bring to the business? So how far are organizations in that journey? If you would have to classify on a general view, organizations, if we'd like to limit UK, if that's the area we have worked with, how do you see that?
So sorry, Adriana, do you mean in terms of how mature are organizations?
Yes, what is the percentage of organizations who are actually mature and they are actively using business architecture approach and methodology and tools to improve and to keep up with the changes and prepare for the future in the current context.
Okay. Vicky, I wasn't sure if you were going to lead on that one.
Yes, I can go into that. I think, you know, having worked across now as an architecture consultant across many of the business sectors, I'm seeing it at various levels of maturity. I think, as with all things, really, they've got some of their strategy and execution teams looking to understand and relay their motivations and understand where they're wanting to go in their strategies. And you've got people then trying to think about how that grows. But I think for me, this is almost the newest of the architecture domains, in essence. It's really started to take off just recently. There's lots, the technical architecture, the infrastructure architecture, those data architecture domains have always had quite a level and got to now quite a good firm footing as a profession and as an institution, if you will, within a company. But at the moment, when you look at business architecture, it's still quite divorced from those other architectural capabilities, with business architecture tending to reside more in that business space and away and outside of the enterprise architecture functions, away and outside of the technology and the infrastructure. I do understand, David, my sound's not great. My Wi-Fi isn't brilliant. I apologise. And it's about now they're starting to grasp it. I think more and more organisations are getting the value that it can bring in helping them to get there. Certainly over the last couple of days at the conferences we've been speaking, at the IRM conference, we've been talking about this, and it's coming more and more to light that people are finally actually starting to get the grasp of how important this is, how invaluable being able to understand how your organisation is made up and all those cogs and those component parts that are critical in order to help you to succeed. And having somebody that can understand that and understand the services and the value stream, and having that sort of business architecture service, which I know Debbie will come and talk to within your company, and the outputs that can deliver, not only helps you sort of manage and understand the change of what's going on and what needs to happen, but I think organisations are really now seeing the true value that it can offer, not only in that strategy to execution field, but also in that change management function where they're helping to inform what change is happening, inform the impact assessment of change, and there's also the scoping element. So at the moment, I think business architecture is having its moment. It's certainly on the rise. And as I've spoken to a few others in other areas, you know, you're seeing other teams almost being moved, and let's try and get a little bit more to that. But the business architecture is starting to become a little bit more of a protected and recognised profession, in that it is difficult to understand the knock-on effect of all of these things and help and inform the people and the roles and what have you that you need. Because if you've got people on your team that know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what you need to do it, crikey, you're halfway there, right?
I think that's it. And I'm seeing the same as you, Vicky, that, you know, different organisations are at different points of maturity, but it really does seem to be a discipline that is becoming more and more prominent and getting more and more recognition. And in our world of digital change, actually getting recognition for the value that a particular discipline can offer can be quite difficult. And I think, you know, business architecture, I remember going to one of the very first Business Architecture Guild conferences, and that must be 10, 12 years ago. So, you know, there's a bit of a heritage there, but it has taken some time for it really, really to develop. And I think in terms of maturity, it's not there, I don't think, in most places, because actually, you know, what does maturity really mean? But I think it is getting there in the sense that there's now, you know, quite a well-defined and accepted focus, a well-defined and accepted set of techniques and products. And I think as well, and this is one of the things we did in the book, aligning it with that sort of, as you said, Vicky, that service view of the organisation. You know, there's no point in having an architecture for it not to help you do something. Exactly. So understanding what it is we're trying to do and how these things fit together to enable the organisation to do it, I think is very much becoming really a greater understanding and a lot more recognition out there in sense of maturity. I also think, though, you're absolutely right, some of the other architectural domains, you know, such as data architecture, applications architecture, there's something a bit more tangible about that, isn't there? You know, whereas what is business architecture? It's a bit like business analysis. What are these things? Because they're quite open, they've got a certain intangibility to them. So we've almost got to really make the case and define them so that that understanding and recognition really starts to hold sway. And I think the maturity is growing, but I do think that recognition and that understanding still has a way to go.
That is good to have this overview of the role. Sorry, please continue. I'm just reflecting on the back of my hand. Yes, Vicky has disappeared from my screen at the moment. But well, let's see if she will be able to reconnect with us.
Yeah, I think Vicky's having lots of Wi-Fi problems.
Add on to that, and I think you're right. And I think with the strongest place.
Yeah, I think probably we missed everything you said, Vicky, and at the moment I can't hear you.
I did stop speaking to give my Wi-Fi a catch up. Hopefully I'm back.
We can hear you now, yes.
I might just, if it's okay, just turn my camera off to give myself a little bit more chance with the bandwidth, if that's okay.
Yeah.
If you could repeat what you have said, Vicky, for us to catch up with what the last content you shared with us.
Yeah, I was just trying to suggest that where I've seen business architecture in its most mature state, it's where they've got a clear governance and strategy team and function that have got that direction and that have got that either growth or an acquisition mindset, because they are understanding where they need to sort of manage their capabilities. Certainly as they're acquiring other organizations, they don't want to take that duplication, and they're understanding, you know, we might have 2 HR functions or whatever, and that's where I've seen it in its strongest. It's in more of that acquisition and in that really strong strategic sort of setting that's I've seen the more mature and the more robust artifacts and service delivery.
And I'm just checking that we got a few questions. There are questions that will be covered on the second part of our conversation, but there is a question that came from Julia in the chat at the moment, which is about what we have been talking. And to be fair, it was the question that was on the back of my head. What are the key characteristics of an organization that is ready, mature enough to approach its business architecture, evaluate it, and implement the BizArt principles across the enterprise? Who would like to take that question?
Shall I start, Vicky, on that one?
Yes, please.
It sort of tags it. Okay.
Okay. It really is quite interesting that when you're looking at maturity of any particular discipline within an organization, I think there are certain things that you have to think about. So the first thing is that you have to understand what are the tools, the artifacts, the service offering, the contribution that discipline makes to the organization. I think you have to have recognition at a senior level of that contribution, because if you don't have that, then actually the discipline doesn't have a chance to really make the impact that it could. But I also think there's another factor for me, which is how well it is integrated with the other change disciplines. So one of the things that Vicky and I and everybody else encountered at the conference this week was a lot of discussion around turf wars, around, well, we've got all these roles, how do they work together? And you feel sometimes that in some organizations, and I think one of the keynote speakers actually said this, that if we're not sure about how to do something, we invent a new role. And sometimes we already have that role. We're just not sure about it, and we don't recognize it, and we don't understand the service offering of that particular discipline. So to me, if we're really going to evaluate maturity, we need to think about, is the service portfolio clearly defined? Do we understand the artifacts, the outputs, the products that that particular discipline is offering? Has it got strategic alignment, and has it got recognition, not only for itself, but how it aligns with the other disciplines, which it needs to work with, support, enable, etc. And those are the things that I look for. Vicky, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think a real tangible and a real easy way of understanding how mature an organisation is when you see a business architect sat on the change forum. It's when you see a business architect sat talking about project scope. It's when you've got the business architects that are involved when somebody says, oh, we think, what are the KPIs? How do we do this? It's that when you see that person represented on the change board and their insights and their input in, that's a physical observation that you can see that these guys get this, because they're listening to the voice, they're understanding the value that that person can bring when they're helping them inform their strategy. It's fine having this 5-year roadmap, but if that's going to absolutely flip turn your whole organization and you haven't got any services to achieve that, you haven't got any of the functions or the process or the operating model to support and withstand that, that's where you really start to see that these people get it, they're involved in them, they're using them. And on the flip side, it's that the highest level of maturity is when they're asking those business architects, right, how can we get more bang for our buck? These are our services at the moment. How can we reuse these capabilities that are delivering these services to deliver new ones? And it's inviting them to influence and inform that strategic direction. That for me, that's sort of the nut, isn't it? That's the utopia that we want to get to, is when we've got these business architects informing some of that business strategy, going, this is what you've got. These are the capabilities that are delivering these services. How about we could do this? Have you thought about doing that? And really you being that voice of strategic reason to go, you've got all this stuff, right? We can reuse it and we can do so much more with it. And that's when you know that a company's really got that maturity.
That's really quite interesting, Vicky, because my favourite word linked to business architecture, as all my colleagues will tell you, is the word leverage. And I talk about leveraging the capabilities. And if you've got an organisation that recognises that it's not just about building the models, it's actually about understanding that if you get, a major world event, say, that actually you can look at, well, what have we got that we can leverage? Maybe we might need to extend or enhance a bit, but if we can leverage this in the main, that may allow us to have organisation agility because we can respond at pace. This is where you know that it's all working in a really, really effective way for the organisation. And that is the point that I'm not sure all organisations have got to, but I think that's what they should be striving for. And as you said, Vicky, and having that voice being heard, because that is what really makes the difference.
Absolutely. Trusted advisor.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's great. And moving and bridging from how we know the maturity of an organization, let's think about the modern business architect. What are the skill sets that the modern business architect needs? I believe Vicky will be talking to us about that first, isn't it? Yes.
Thank you, Adriana. I think we were talking about this a little bit in the conference about diversity, and about a gentleman from the King's Trust asked us about this. How can we grow? How can we develop? What are the skills that a modern business architect needs? And for me, and certainly on the panel at the time, the main skill is curiosity. Be curious. Understand why, understand what for, have that skill to not be, and a lot of it's around the softer skills, if you will, because you need to be able to work and talk to those senior stakeholders, as we've spoken about, to try and understand what are their motivations for what they're wanting to do. Why are you wanting to do that? And to have that confidence and that ability to challenge people, that's not an easy skill at all. Not everybody likes doing that. Not everybody wants to be that person that says, yes, but what for? Why are we doing that? And that's quite a strong skill that's needed. I think being able to articulate yourself in such an environment, having courage and conviction to be able to articulate as well the challenges and the suppositions, and to say, well, I understand why you want to do that, but have you thought about, here's another mindset, here's another viewpoint. That's really difficult, and that's, yeah, that comes with time and with experience. Things such as, you know, being able to create the models and what have you, those are things that can be taught. Those are things that we can learn on the job. But having that curiosity, having common sense, you know, if only common sense was more common, that would be great, right? But it's about having that ability and that being able to get the knock-on effect of something, being able to see across things. And because whilst we're talking about business architecture, we're looking at processes at the highest level of process, not going into the detail of it, of course, and metrics and goals and KPIs and business terminology and measure. It's about understanding how all of those things come together to deliver those services, and to be able to see that bigger picture and think that, but what does that mean for the business, for its organization, for its reputation, for its customers? And what do we need in order to be able to do that? We've talked about communication and those softer skills with the C-suite and with those more strategic and senior people. But as a business architect, you've also then got to be able to translate that into people that are going to be working to deliver the change. So working to the program managers, informing and communicating scope of change, the rationale behind it, helping get those programs and changes off the ground, and maybe helpful also, you know, influencing some of those application choices, being able to say, understand and have input into some of that area. It's quite important as well. You kind of become a little bit of a bridge between that technology area and that business domain as you sit and communicate and articulate. So you've got to have that ability and a little bit of knowledge about how things are working in the organization in that layer below, as well as that layer above. And that's quite a challenging thing to do. Obviously, listening skills are also really, really high up there. And by listening, I don't just mean listening to the words that come out of people's mouth. It's listening to their body language as well, because it's very easy to, when you're looking at the job roles and the actors and understanding the functions and what's happening and the services and the value streams. But sometimes as you're making these decisions and making these recommendations that actually we could refine this, we could do that. If you don't want to deliver this service anymore, we could actually look to do X, Y, and Z. Being able to listen to the mood of the, you know, these things are going to be hard, and you're going to have to adapt and reflect your conversation and your tone and your messaging with that, because you're not always going to be in a very comfortable place. And the business architect isn't just there to give the good news stories about how we can grow and expand and get more leverage from what our capabilities, but sometimes they've got that not so nice thing of going, well, actually, I think we need to start and turn off. I think we need to start and unwind. And it's about using a phrase that somebody said at the conference, facts to displace the fear, and being able to try and to use that information and to convey that in a way and listen to your stakeholders about what their real needs are, not just the wants. And I think that goes through the layers. Debbie, I'll offer you an input onto that.
Okay, I'm not sure I can add much to that other than I always, I mean, I know it's a concept that's been around for a long time, but I do like the concept of T-shaping.
Yes.
And one of the reasons I like it is actually because there's a really nice definition, because there are different interpretations of a T-shape, but there's a really nice definition by a researcher called Gorman, and he talks about the horizontal bar being about engagement with people and the organization, which taps exactly into what you've been talking about, Vicky. And I like that, because I've seen the T-shaping used in different ways, but I like that engagement piece because it also says that you've got to have skills of things like negotiation and influencing, which I think as a business architect, you know, if you're going to have that seat at the sort of strategic decision-making table, being able to influence and negotiate is going to be absolutely vital. But the other side of it is understanding business, understanding commerce. This is one of my pet subjects, so apologies, but getting the numbers, because when organizations are having to respond sometimes to quite dramatic change. At the moment, a lot of organizations, for example, are thinking, or how are we going to react given the AI developments, so when you've got a certain level of change, you do need to understand commerce as well, and you need to understand exactly how does that work in an organization, things like cost modeling and understanding pricing. All those types of things, they really are incredibly useful, and a lot of people don't understand them. So I think that's a whole area of skill. If you look at the vertical then in the T-shape, the vertical is the sort of particular professional discipline. And again, there are a lot of tools and techniques in the business architect toolkit, some of which you might say, well, actually, that sits also in a business analyst toolkit or a project manager toolkit or a service designer toolkit. That's absolutely fine. So there are some, like capability modeling, that very much are very closely tied with the business architect. There are others, like analytical thinking, which I also think is vital, that maybe cross a number of different disciplines, but they're still highly relevant to the business architect. To my way of thinking, if somebody wants to be a professional business architect, you really have to look at your toolkit and your skill set very, very seriously. And understanding the terminology is very important. I do hear people talking about capability when they mean someone's skill. And understanding that actually a capability is made up of a number of elements, not just a person with skill, is just an example of how working as a really proficient business architect, you need to understand some of the nuances in some of the language and really what the models are telling you, and therefore how you use them.
That's very helpful, Debra. And just before I pass on to my colleague Katerina, one question that came on the chat, and there are others that we can pick up in due course, because I think they sit well with the second part of our discussion. Considering this, the skill sets we have discussed and the T-shape approach to the role, how would a business architect know, or how could they evaluate the results of the work they do as a business architect? Considering the skills you said that they should use and the ability they should develop knowledge, what kind of metrics would you think that would be useful in this case?
Okay, shall I go first, Vicky, or do you want to? I mean, I'm happy to, but I'm aware I've been talking for a while. Okay, I'm not sure if Vicky's signal's gone a little bit, so I will start on this. Okay, so there are different scenarios at play here. So first of all, if you are going to produce business architecture blueprints, I would evaluate those on them being accurate, fitting with the company's standards, consistent. So all those classic quality attributes that you would expect to see from any products that are actually documenting an organization at all sorts of different levels. So that I would see as one measure of success. And I know that sounds like a very tangible output-focused measure rather than an outcome-focused measure, but I do think it's still relevant because, I do see artifacts created, in different areas where they're not consistent, where they're not actually using the technique effectively. And that's not to say we should, use techniques effectively for their sake, but actually, if we're talking about communication and application, having something that's accurate, consistent, conforms to standards is actually very, very important because it improves the communication and usage. So I think you've got that output element. Similarly, if a business architect is involved in looking at, well, okay, we need to understand the service offering that the organization wants to put an architecture in place for, then you're looking at outcomes. And that, again, is then evaluating, have we actually defined that service offering effectively so that it can be delivered into operation? And also, have we understood what capabilities are needed to enable that. So, for example, if you've got an organisation that says, right, we want to offer this service, one of the key artifacts you'd expect to see would be a value stream model, which is very high level, as Vicky said just now, and just says for that service, these are the high level activities. But, you know, that's just an image of what you need to put in place. What the capability enablement needs to look like then is what has to be in place to actually make sure those activities operate effectively in practice and together in order to deliver the outcome we want. So you need to understand in that case, what are the business outcomes we want? You know, do we want a particular engagement with our customers, a take-up of sales, or whatever that might be? And therefore, is this service that we have architected actually achieving that? There are other measures as well around customer satisfaction, but I don't want to completely take over. So I'm going to hand it back to Vicky to give her ideas now.
Yeah, and it's about that, like exactly as you say, it's about that ability to understand if this is the service we want to do, how are we going to do it? What are we going to do it with? What would good look like? How are we going to leverage, again, that fabulous word, what we already have without, and to do this affordably? It's back to that understanding of the capitalization and of money and of cost to deliver. And even better and an add-on is if, as an architect, you can show the different tiers and levels of service that can be achieved. So if we want to go with this might be an option of a bronze level, a silver level, a gold level, you know, and to provide that variation to inform and advise again of, you know, because companies, they have these fabulous ideas if we want to go and do this and we want to go and do that, but they don't always understand the intricacies of it and how difficult that would be, and, you know, all of the different setup that's needed in order to achieve that. So understanding those value streams, understanding the capabilities that are needed to do that, and then what would for each of those look like if we started to lift that, you know. Because sometimes the cost of a service, it might be wonderful that we want to be able to, everybody to, you know, have face recognition when we walk into a hospital and have automatic attendance, you know, oh, somebody's walked in, that means they're here for their appointment, let's automatically register that. It's a fabulous service, right? But is it realistically affordable? Is it viable? Does it work with the rest of the strategic direction of the organisation, or is it in conflict with it? And I think once you can start and bring that sort of language into your products, into the way that you're working, then you know you're really in those top spots. Thinking about not only of that service, but of those peripheral services that it might impact, how that relates to other strategies, and how that also relates to other change that's going on, right? So that's when you know, when you can say, actually, this is how you do that, and this was what we would need it. But by the way, did you know you've got this stuff going on also in your capability model? Your capability mapping and planning that comes in as that business architect is another way of saying, and actually your best time to do this would be this, 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 and this, because of other stuff that's going on in that organization. So that for me is when, you know, they are tangible metrics again of products and deliverables that help you know that you're doing the good job. When you start and try and anticipate not just the thing you've been asked to architect, but everything that's going on and around that.
That's thank you very much, and I think we
I'm
have
done. I'm not
segued in the
frozen.
next question, isn't it? Well, sorry, I thought you had finished, Vicky. For a moment, I missed you. I lost you here on the signal, but I think we have segued in the next question, and I pass on to Katerina to continue this dialogue, this conversation.
I just feel that we've touched upon like the theoretical
Yeah.
part and also on the different capabilities, and that it's not interchangeable with the skill. I guess this is very important consideration for everybody, that it's not the synonymous things to be used. But from a practical side, if I need to pitch, what are the benefits that the organization can get out of the capability view to my boss tomorrow? How can you summarize those benefits? What we can offer, capability view can offer?
Okay, so there are financial benefits, because financial benefits can accrue from the fact that you've got people working to ensure that we can reuse where possible. We can grasp opportunities at pace because we're leveraging rather than reinventing the wheel every single time. That we can pull together what we have and form new capabilities sometimes that actually address a real and live issue, so that you get that organizational cost efficiency and agility to actually deal with situations. That you can ensure, and this comes back to something Vicky said, that you look at the different options for levels of service and the value that can be offered at those different levels. And because you've got that combination of mindset around financial acumen, commercial acumen, and understanding what the organization has got available to it, then you can actually really help the organization to make the most of its assets, basically, and deliver to its customers, making the most of those assets. In the book, Vicky actually came up with one particular part of one of the chapters, which was talking about organizational competence. And I thought that was such a really good way of looking at it, because what it was saying was, you know, different organizations have different capabilities. Some of them don't make the use of their capabilities. Sometimes they think they have capabilities and actually it's not fully formed or fully there. And understanding what you've got and ensuring that what you've got is actually good and effective is really going to help the organization financially and in a commercial context. Vicky, I love that term, you see, organizational competence.
Yeah. And it is, and it's understanding again, you know, back to the what value can a business architect bring, right? Back to Debra's part, if we look at a couple of scenarios and you look at, you know, Uber, for example, they had the capability to person B and allow a person to monitor it. You've got those capabilities, and what I really like to think is that a business architect went, hang on, if we've got that and we can do that, we can then offer this service and we'll just move food, we'll move pizzas, we'll move X, Y, and Z. And that's where your business architect can really help identify what I call those Uber moments to help you just grow and deliver and do more. But on the flip side, that business architect, again, back to the side, can say, this service isn't really being taken up anymore. It's actually being, you know, it isn't working effectively, it isn't working efficiently. We could be doing this service, and in doing this, that means we don't need these cases more because value streams aren't, these capabilities aren't anymore. That means you can turn off this stack. That means you can help things, or actually you can set of these processes. We could repeat, we could about conformity, keeping that up ahead as a business architect. You need
Vicky, I think you should turn your video off because your sound is breaking up quite a lot now.
You need to be under.
Hello, Vicky.
I'm not sure if Vicky's Wi-Fi is dying on her there. That's a shame.
Well, while we have Vicky back, Katerina, would you like to lead us to the next question?
Yeah, I feel that we can actually take one of the questions that we got from the audience.
Yes, please do.
Because I feel that we really need to cover that practical side and how we can actually deliver that value, how we can leverage the business architecture, if I may. So we got one question from one of our attendees. What is the best way to link value stream, capabilities, and business processes?
Right.
You've been expecting this, aren't you? That's you.
Yeah, that's
one of the things we were really keen to do in the book answers that question, okay? Because we applied very much a service lens to architecture. What that meant was that rather than looking at, well, we could produce a document that is a target operating model, or we could produce a blueprint of a capability map or something like that, we started by saying, what is it this organization's trying to do? What is it trying to offer to its customers, to its target audience? And that is a service definition level. Now, you can define a service by describing it. You should always consider the value proposition that it's offering. And you also need to understand the audience that that value proposition is intending to deliver to. Okay. Taking it down a level, then you can start thinking about the value stream. And you can say, okay, so if this is the service, these are the high-level activities. This is the high-level model that is going together with all these activities together, is going to be able to offer that value proposition to this customer group. Once you know that, then you have to start saying, okay, so if we've got this area of activity in our value stream, what capabilities do we need to enable that activity to take place? And so you've got a direct link there between your capabilities and your value stream activities. And at that point, you might look at the activity and say, well, actually, yes, some of the capabilities are in place, but there's an area of capability that maybe needs some work. We might need to put a project in place to actually do something, in which case, you might engage with your business analysts at that point, because they might be the people who go, okay, we'll have a look at this, we'll look at what the requirement is, and we'll see what a solution might be to enhance or improve that capability. That then allows you to get that overview of what's needed. Down to process modeling, though, at some point you have to say, okay, how is this going to actually look in practice? What are the detailed processes going to look at? If you take one area of activity, what events is it handling? What scenarios is it handling? Therefore, how can I model that at a process level? And in modeling at a process level, I can then start thinking, okay, what is automatable about this? What do we have in terms of applications in our applications architecture that we can bring into play here? So it all starts to come together, and then you can take that process model, swim lane diagram, down another level, down to the individual user, if you want to. And so then you've got that sort of user experience of using applications to do the work of the process model, to fulfill the capability that meets the activity in the value stream, that will deliver the service and offer the value proposition.
Yes,
exactly
like the levels.
Exactly that.
You're going down.
Yeah.
It's like first the service. We are the service designer head. Then value stream. And then capabilities to support your. Okay, good. Does it make sense to the person who has asked that? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
And I think to add that, once you've got that capability, the way that process comes in, and I'm going to refer back to the Assist KD Pop-it model, because that is where you start to understand the process, the organization, the technology, and the information that come together to achieve that. You're not going into the depths and the depths of the process. You're understanding that high level view of what's needed. And that's then that bridges, it's that little, I do love your poppets, but that's how that then bridges and understands those application services that need to be exposed. So, and I'm currently doing this at the moment for the NHS. We're looking at what are the services, is the value stream of those services, because each value stream section obviously is a part on its own that you may wish to remove, and they will have a separate set of capabilities underneath it. So you might expose 7 or 8 capabilities that you need in order to deliver that value stream. And that's where you can then obviously identify where your real critical capabilities are, because you start to see the same ones popping up again and again and again, supporting the different value streams. And that gives you that view of your critical capability identification.
I'm thinking that since you mentioned that you're currently working on a project where you're doing exactly what we just discussed, are there any hints and tips that can help you in either using or building the business capabilities model, like any challenges that you have faced with and how to overcome them, if there is any instruction.
So I think language is always the most difficult thing, right? Language, semantics. I say this, I mean that. You say this, you mean that. And when we're talking about capability, what do we mean by that? What do we mean by a service? A service, when I talk about a service, it means one thing to me. It might mean something to somebody else. And one of the challenges that you will find as a business architect is that not everybody thinks like this or in this way at the moment. Debbie and I and others that have been doing this a long time, we all look at services. What are the services of the business? And let's architect for those services. Let's understand how we do that and achieve that. And we're talking services from that real business level, all into, and then obviously as the EA it goes down into the other domains, but it is always going to be about language and getting agreement of terms at the start. If I say product, what do I mean? If I say service, what do I mean? What do you mean by that? And getting that out in the open and having that placemat and baseline to start with, I would say, is your number one go-to. Be clear on what you mean and make sure that that's you're using a language that organization is comfortable with. We might want to be really, really purist about it, but there's no point in being so if what you're saying is going to land on deaf ears. You've got to understand that, sort of back to that listening skill of listening to how they talk, listening to what they're comfortable with. Yes, you're there to help them grow and develop, but at the same time, you've got to take them with you on that journey and find out where they are, talk their language to start with, and then bring people with you.
Can I add to that, Katerina? Because I completely agree with what Vicky's just said. And I do find that there are terms used where some people have a very, very specific understanding of them and others don't. And if you don't have that clarity, then actually you can get into all sorts of assumptions. And those assumptions are really not going to be very helpful in terms of ensuring you achieve the business outcomes. One of the terms that at Assist we're very clear on is the difference between a product and service, okay? Because a product is something that's developed and delivered. Service involves understanding your audience and understanding the customer experience and understanding that in order for value to ensue, you've got to co-create that value by working effectively with that audience. So that's just an example, but we're very, very clear on the difference between those terms, which means that we all understand exactly what we're talking about when we're discussing it and when we're trying to improve. And terminology, I think, in this area can be it can be very misleading, can lead to assumptions, and we do have to be very careful about it.
Absolutely.
It's a great perspective, and I think it's really relevant at any point, whether you're using the business capability model or just at the beginning of your journey, just to set the language. It's really important. And we do have the question, Adrian, that we would like to ask from the audience.
Yes, just before we go to that, we have someone with the hands up. We will allow Tonya to speak soon. So we have from your previous discussion on how to link the capability processes and is a value stream. We also consider that we answer previous other questions, such as how do we relate business capability to business process, and what is the synergy between business architect and business analyst? We have covered all that. So let me just see. I have seen that we don't have the hands up anymore. So maybe the person wouldn't like to speak. But we have one question, which is, let's see if you are able to, if you can answer this. What is the difference or comparison of business architect and business visionary in the SDM?
Gosh, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure I would be able to define a business visionary for DSDM.
No.
It's not something I've looked at for a very long time. I mean, I think if I was to assume, and it would be an assumption, and I've already said I don't like doing it, I would imagine that a visionary is somebody who envisages a future state. Now, to a certain extent, you could say that a business architect is looking to help the organization look towards a target or future state. But I think architecture of an organization there's a certain quite tangibility about it, that it's putting the building blocks in place. So whilst you might be looking towards a target operating model or a target service or something like that, you do understand what the building blocks are and putting them in place. So while I think, if I'm interpreting the word visionary correctly, I can see a link there. I just think one goes from a much more idealistic, maybe conceptual view, whereas I think the architect needs to understand a conceptual view, but needs to put something very much more practical and tangible in place. I don't know what you think, Vicky.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that, from that perspective and thinking in this space, if that visionary is no holds barred, what do we think that down the line something might be? It's that horizon scanning, it's that trying to predict, trying to be ahead of the game, not particularly being overly mindful about where you are at the moment and what you've got. It's that, if we look at hospital services, it would be the Big Hero 6, if you will. For those of you that like that cartoon, the visionary might think that we could all have a robot in our house that could take our temperature, take our diagnostics, and actually that's where we ought to be going. This is really visionary. This is big bang stuff. This would be great. Whereas the architect would then be going, yeah, that's wonderful, right? But we've got this, that, and the other, and then trying to consider those roadmaps if that's really where the business then decides it wants to go. So the visionary would be those that are designing the self-driving cars. That's where we need to be. That'll really resolve it. Whereas your business architect's going, right, okay, and helping and support and realizing how achievable is it? What are the services that we've got? How might we do that? So that for me is the difference, is that visionary is really going for it sort of miles and miles in the future, not really overly concerned with what we've got, but trying to be really innovative, really entrepreneurial about ways of resolving some of the challenges that we've got. And then the business architect almost might bring a little bit of reality into this is where we are and how we get there. But that's my thoughts on that. I don't know.
That's really interesting. And I was thinking how that fits with the different capability views of the organization, how the visionary would inform those layers. I think it's something for to reflect going forward. We are nearly coming to the end of our session. I would like to thank Debra and Vicky for being with us today and having this excellent conversation on this very instigating topic. Thank you, Katerina, for being for helping guide the questions. Thank everyone in the audience who has sent your questions and contributed with this discussion. I would like to invite everyone who's available, is around London on the 2nd of July. Come and join us at the Methods office and have a session where the session will be led by the book authors. And we will have the unique opportunity to meet them face to face, to interact, to make questions and learn from practical applications of business architecture and the lessons learned that people will be shared on the day, and all that along with networking opportunities at the office. So come for a good chat and a glass of wine if you can. We'll be waiting for you. Please, you can register on our website for the session. Vicky and Debra, would you have any final words for our audience?
I'd just like to say thank you for some excellent questions because I really enjoyed that discussion. I always enjoy talking to Vicky about these particular matters and concerns because we discuss them a lot, but there were some terrific questions there, and it really is always good to think about these things, isn't it? Get your brain cells going. So that's my final thought for today. Thank you.
And Vicky? I think Vicky might be off. Well, it's 7 p.m. Last word, Debra. If people would like to get the book and start reading and learning from it, where can they get the book?
Well, there's a link on the Assist KD website in the Learning Zone, and it is available, and the link takes you through to Amazon. So it is available on Amazon as well. I think BCS also have a bookshop area of the website, but I have found it easier just to go through to Amazon.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you very much, Debra. Thank you, Vicky. Thank you, Katerina. And yes, if you would like, don't forget, join us on the 2nd of July if you can. And just on a note, you don't need to have read the book or bought the book to attend. You can just join us on the day and just start learning with us. That's what we are here for as a community. Katerina, any final words from you?
Just thank you to all the active audience today. It was a pleasure to be part of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katerina. So thank you, everyone. And we are going to stop the recording now. And we are finished today. Thank you, everyone, for
Thank you very much.
contributing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.